Day 6 of the build, and we're getting quite close to starting the engine. Windscreen is done, exhaust pipe still has to be done, and the air conditioning radiator condenser still has to be done. Electrics are complete, fuel system is complete, power steering all put back together again. Air filter steel needs to go in there, but we're doing very, very well. I'm Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and then travelling to the remotest parts of the world.
Andrew, imagine you're in the bush and you've gone to some small little workshop. You really don't know how good the guys are. Unlike here, we know the guys, we trust them. There's certain checks that I always do when someone's done a service on my car, and they absolutely are the bare bones safety checks so that things don't go wrong. And I've seen it and I know it happens. So basically, when they've serviced the car, they've changed the oil and filter. Okay, I want to make sure that the drain plug at the bottom of the engine has been properly tightened. I've watched them tighten, I actually feel it myself, just to make sure that's properly tight, new washer, and I know the oil can't fall out. Because you wouldn't believe it, people leave that not tight, someone's distracted, it comes loose, you lose all your oil, and your engine seizes. The next thing is the oil filter. Now here the oil filter sits. Generally these should be put on by hand. Take the new oil filter, a little bit of oil on it, on the rubber seal, screw it on by hand. After the guy's fitted it, just come and grab it with your hands, dry hands or a cloth, and just make sure that that's tight. By hand, you tighten it as tight as you can. Don't use a tool to tighten it. Generally you over tighten the filter and you can damage it. The other thing, once they've put oil in the engine's actually got to run that oil through, fill up the filter. So after they've started the engine, in fact as the guy starts the engine, I want to make sure that the oil light goes out, oil pressure comes up, nothing's running out, and after they've run it for 15 to 20 seconds, maybe half a minute, turn it off, let the oil settle, and then check your dipstick. Check that the oil is actually sitting on the mark. Now it's actually sitting slightly high on the mark because we haven't run this engine yet. And these guys know they slightly overfill it. They know the amount of oil that needs to go in this engine. It's like 12 liters. And when this is run and it's checked and it's settled, it should be exactly on the mark, or top it up. So that's really, really important. So we've actually added to the fuel filter system. This car came out with 2 filters, but on the Terrain Tamer product line, they actually supply us this very nice flash loop filter system. It's got a filter that takes the filter down to 30 microns. That's right, 30 microns. So it's basically better than the normal filter. It's also got the look bowl that you can look in. You can actually see if there's any sediment. So the first thing I'd pick up if there's a problem and you've been driving, you've just filled up with fuel, the car's either smoking, it's not pulling properly, stop, have a look in here. Have a look in this little bowl here and see if you can see any sediment. Maybe there's water, which means that the water will be on the bottom. The fuel floats on top of the water. It's got a drain, you can drain off anything, but really that's telling us a story. It's telling us there's a problem in the tank, there's probably water in the tank. Sometimes they mix paraffin with the diesel. More recently in Botswana there's been sludge that some of the safari vehicles have picked up, which really has a problem once it gets into the injection pump. So we're trying to make sure that before it gets into the injection pump, in fact even better, before it gets into your tank. Now I'm very sure that if I go to a small remote place which has got old pumps, they're probably tanks that haven't been serviced, they're old, they've probably got sludge at the bottom, and if you're unlucky to get the last fill, you might put all that in your tank. So how do we prevent that? You could simply carry a jar, an empty glass jar, ask the guy to put a bit of fuel in the jar before it goes in your tank, and have a look at the clarity of the fuel, have a look to see if there's any sediment, any separation. That's going to tell you a story. You can buy a filter, a pre-filter, it's a funnel. Raycore do it, drop it into the filler.
What is the name of that thing? I can't remember what they call it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a great...
it's a very nice thing.
It's something I do take, actually. Okay. I don't use it too often, but...
Filter Man?
No, it's got... There are a
Sludge
couple of
Man.
Sludge Man. There's actually in Australia they've got one that's also something similar. So it's basically a plastic funnel, and when you're going to fill up at the tank, at the fuel station, the fuel goes into that funnel, it separates water and it separates any impurities. And you'll be surprised when you've filled up your tank and you look in the funnel and you go, all that would have gone into my tank. So, you know, it's a good habit to get into using something like that. Or if you're not sure, you know, if you drive into a small town, ask people where the best fuel station is to use. You know, you and I picked up bad fuel at a good station in Khansi in Botswana.
Paul and I have come to Botswana to shoot a web series called Overland Workshop.
Do I have the knowledge I need to go on this trip?
We sit and discuss various overland and off-road topics, such as water, survival, which spares to carry, cooking, security, handling border posts, and a whole lot more.
We're talking overlanding.
One of the topics, fuel contamination, actually became a problem while we were talking about it. So it was not just a matter of theories, but we had a problem and we needed to solve it.
Okay, a very interesting thing is happening right now as we're driving. We've just left Khansi. We put 90 litres of fuel in the back tank. We want to get to the Makati. We want to be as light as possible. We do need a reasonable amount of fuel. And we decided let's fill up the front tank, leave that alone, back tank enough to get to the pans. By the time we get there, we will be empty. Now, the car's running terribly.
Yeah, well, we've got two options now. So, because we found that the problem is giving us this kind of like jerking sensation while we're driving.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the vehicle's not getting enough fuel. So what we've got is we've got a particle buildup. So junk from the Bowser, from their tanks, have actually now gone into our fuel tank.
So you think this is contamination?
Well, there's two things. Or there's fuel contamination. Now, some of these garages have very old tanks, and these old tanks either have water condensation inside the tank, they don't always clean the tanks out often enough,
right?
Or, in very rare cases, they go and they mix paraffin with the diesel to bulk it up.
You've got to wait for this to settle, and then you see your dirt line coming there. We'll shift it like if it was gold. How's that? You see now how dirty it is there. And you compare a new filter next to it. Put the new filter next to it.
So would you say it was high level of dirt rather than contamination? Is that what you would suggest?
I'd say it's more dirt, fine dirt particles.
So you never know, but generally a busy fuel station is going to have a higher turnover of fuel and less
And that's
likely.
why we went there.
And that's why we went there, and we still got stuck.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the fuel basically comes from the tank. It comes into this very nice filter system. It gets pumped through into the original Toyota system. Now it's a very similar system. It's also got a sedimenter water trap. It's got a little float inside here, and the wire that comes from here will put a light on the dash if the water becomes too much here. Generally, that never really happens too often if you're looking at the problem here, or if you're feeling it. You know, you drive your car, you feel it's just not pulling the way it was 2 hours ago. Ask yourself, what have you just done? Oh, I've just put fuel in. Probably the problem. So when you come to change the filters, you know, you always carry a couple of spare filters. So you've got actually 4 of these, and you'll carry at least 2 or 3 of these, depending on where you're going, how far you're going, and generally have at least 2 of each in your vehicle at all times. When you use them up, you can just replace. In this situation, if we had a problem, we couldn't get the flash loop spare filters, we could literally bypass it by just swapping one of the hoses, leaving this filter out, and just using the Toyota one. But the advantage of having the 2 filters is going to be a double. He's determined to make it noisy for us. I think he's waiting for us to go up and down. Anyway, so the filter comes from the tank, in through here, through to this one. Now, new filters mean that these are both empty, and you need to now get the fuel from the tank to fill up these filters and basically bleed all the air out. So what I tend to do is I take this pipe off, which is going to the engine. I put my finger over the end here and I pump, and as I'm pumping, as you push the air out, my finger comes away. So I push the little button down. This is the actual pump. This is nice and hard now. So when I push this down, it pushes the air out. I let my finger go and I push my finger back, and it sort of sucks the fuel. So it's like if you're trying to suck from a bucket of water with a hose. Like a siphon.
Same action.
Similar sort of setup. So you do that until eventually you see the fuel come in here, and eventually bleeds itself all the way through here. Now you know the system's not got air in. A little bit of air in this pipe's not a problem. Connect it back up and run your car. And make sure that the fuel in your tank, if that's been compromised, you're going to need to blow this pipe that takes the fuel from the tank back into the tank and drain the tank. Now Now some aftermarket tanks don't have drains on. It's criminal not to have a drain plug on your tank, because you just want to be in that situation where you picked up bad fuel and you now have to drop your whole tank just because you didn't have a drain on it. So if you're having, most good tank manufacturers that I know of, especially in Australia, they build tanks, and I know the South African guys, they build them with good drain plugs. So check that.
We replaced the power steering pump, which is attached to the front of the engine, with a new one. Did we need to replace it? And because we did replace it, now what must we do to get the system working?
No, we didn't need to change this. It was actually still in good condition. What you can get is you actually get a kit, little seals and O-rings that Terrain Tamer do sell, and you can strip this down and just put that kit in. And that's normally enough to stop this leaking. I don't touch these unless there's actually a noise from them or there's absolutely a leak from them. So if they do leak, pull it apart, put the seal kit in, put it back together. We put a brand new one in, so all the oil came out the system, and we're going to change the oil. Now people don't always change power steering oil, and it's sad because it's an oil that works just as hard as any of the other lubricants, and mechanics often get lazy to drain the system and flush it and put new oil in. It's a bit of work to do it, but it's so worth doing, because that oil gets dark and you can start smelling the oil. It's the red Dextron 2 automatic transmission oil. Okay, it's red on my finger, although my finger's a bit dirty. And this oil is what's used in here, or can be a clear power steering oil, depending on what's come out from the factory. Because we've put the new pump in, we actually have to bleed the system. So to not put strain on the system, okay, we jack it up, we take someone in the car, we'll rotate the steering full lock left and right a number of turns just to get the air out the system while we keep topping it up into the reservoir here. Once we're happy that we got most of the air out, then the car gets started and the process gets repeated, and you keep working the steering backwards and forwards to make sure you're getting rid of all the air. And once the air is bled out, then take it for a drive the next morning, check it again, and just monitor it a couple of days just to make sure that the oil's settled. And of course, you know, there are levels on this plug, and you've got a, if I can read that, you get a cold and a hot level. Okay, so top of the cold level, and then of course you've got it when it's hot, it's going to be to the top level. Now that's really important, that you make sure that when you're doing your daily checks, and we'll go through that at some stage, that you absolutely make sure the oil's on level. Because again, if it keeps dropping the level, it's telling you another story. You can drive with a leak on a power steering right around the world, as long as you top it up and it doesn't get too excessive. So really key, good oil, make sure it's great, good parts, and a good system going.
And she's on her wheels, and you can see now the back is very, very high, because they've actually supplied a 600 kilogram spring, but we actually were thinking that a 400 would probably be better. So this is a test with the 600, and even with no spare wheel and bumper on the back, it's pretty obvious to me that a 600 is going to be excessive. So we will fit a 400.
I'm worried you're pumping diesel.
Because I took out the injector lines.
Bleeding the fuel system by pumping the top of the fuel filter. I sense an engine start countdown coming on.
40, check inverters. 30 seconds, check the arm. Minus 20, report stopping. Good. Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Open solo fuel vent. Open. 3, 2, 1, 0.
So now we're going to put it on the left to work on the exhaust, and then make sure everything underneath the vehicle is in good shape.
Is nog hier gefit? Dus ik moet voor je afsnijden. Dus ik heb maar afput. Dat is het die lengte krijgen. Lengte kan krijgen. Zo, kijk net of je hem nou gaat ankransen met jullie die cross mee.
So always, once you've done a big build, it's really important to go and do a nut and bolt check and Just make sure nothing's been forgotten. Just looking carefully. Go through every nut and bolt, look over, check the bolts, check the nuts, check the new pipes that have gone on. The car will then be driven and come back and then retightened again just after everything's settled. So right now we're going to do the exhaust. And as you'll see here, new gearbox mounts, prop shafts have been done. Obviously our very nice gearbox has been redone. It's looking really good. I think the key thing for any vehicle once you've done a big build like this is to make sure you actually go and get a proper test drive done. You know, test drive the car, come back, check it, check for leaks, and literally retrace your steps. Go over every clamp that you tightened, check all the nuts and bolts, check the suspension, recheck the levels. It's an important time. You know, you had the gearbox in pieces. After it's been driven, check the level again, make sure it's all spot on. And it's cool when you do it.
So now at this point it's obviously important for me to reflect on what has been done to the vehicle, how much money I've spent, and to come up with a conclusion of am I ahead of where I thought I would be at this point is the question. My gut feeling is yes. There were so many unknown factors. As much as I know about four-wheel drives and all the things that go with them, there was so much that I didn't know, not just about four-wheel drive generally, but specifically a vehicle and the things that were wrong with it and the things that were, and there's one overriding conclusion that I have come to with this build. If you are looking for a used four-wheel drive vehicle, look for one that has had the least things done to it. The less, this is a case of less is more. Far more, because almost every part of this, sorting this vehicle out, the additional unexpected expense have all been related to aftermarket stuff fitted to the vehicle and that were fitted badly. Not that it just was fitted, it was fitted badly. If it was fitted well, it would be a different story altogether, but it wasn't, and there are enough palookas in this industry, in the motoring industry across the world. Enough people that know so little about what they're doing, they'll happily change it to two-wheel drive or add this and take away this and add this and think they know more than Toyota. And I think this is probably typical, not in terms of what's wrong with the vehicle and what we've corrected, but typical in terms of the fact that when something has been changed in the vehicle, it can so easily cause a whole lot of unexpected results. So again, if you're buying a vehicle, look for one that's been a mum's shopper's car. They are by far the most valuable. Even if the mileage is higher, even if it has no roof rack and no bull bar and no winch, be grateful. Less, in this case, is definitely more. In the next instalment, the final touches as we replace the rear bumper and ready it to carry 2 spare wheels, and a gathering of fans of the channel at Snyman's 4x4 outside of Cape Town, topped with a last-minute electrical glitch that delays my departure on the 1,600 kilometre test run.